One of the biggest risks to your organization's data aren't exactly where you think they are. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we try to unpack the insights that, well, really open our eyes and help you cut through all the noise out there. Today, we're diving deep into the 2025 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. You probably know it as the DBIR. And this particular deep dive, it's actually episode 9 of our Browsing Security series. That's where we, here at LayerX, really get into the security conversations that we think matter most. We had this really great opportunity recently. We hosted a webinar, went behind the scenes a bit with Alex Pinto. He's the brilliant lead author of the DBIR. And our own CEO and co-founder, Or Eshed, was there too. So our mission today isn't just to, summarize the report. We want to analyze the core trends, connect the dots on what's really driving security incidents, especially now with AI just exploding everywhere. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, your essential guide to the pulse of cybersecurity, straight from the experts who, well, collect and analyze this massive amount of data.
Yeah, and what's truly remarkable about the DBIR and why we think it matters so much, maybe more than any other report out there, is its depth and its independence. I mean, 18 years running, it consistently sets itself apart. This isn't just another vendor trying to push their own product, The data isn't only from Verizon, even though their name's on the cover. It's a huge collaboration. We're talking almost 100 different contributors. Cybersecurity vendors like us, LayerX, we're proud contributors, but also incident response firms, governments, NGOs, law enforcement. Everyone brings their piece of the puzzle, right? And the DBIR team's job, which is quite a feat, is to weave all that diverse data into one cohesive story, an unbiased story. They find those narrative threads, what's actually happening. It's a year-long effort, and it reveals trends that, honestly, no single organization could spot on its own.
It's really something, isn't it? That sheer volume of data, all those different viewpoints somehow woven together. So for you listening right now, how do you take something like this huge industry-level report, and actually apply it to your own company's challenges?
Well, from our perspective, as security practitioners, founders, we live this stuff.
Yeah.
And that independence, it's absolutely crucial. Think about vendor reports. They often have, let's call it selection bias, a spike in detections. Maybe it's just more false positives. Or maybe they just started detecting stuff they missed before. You can't really get true credibility there.
Right. It's skewed.
Exactly. But the DBIR cuts through that noise. It gives you accurate, aggregated data. For CSOs, security managers, this is gold. It helps them allocate those tight budgets effectively, make real strategic decisions. We even see big cybersecurity investors relying heavily on the DBIR. It's foundational for them. It helps them see where the real threats are, and it goes deeper, uncovering trends beneath the trends. It's not just, ransomware or, phishing. It's showing the complex stuff, credential theft plus social engineering, then ransomware and data theft all bundled together. That kind of insight, only possible with independent, aggregated data. In an age where, anyone can ask ChatGPT for a threat report, the real edge, the real understanding comes from having the best, most unbiased data.
Okay, speaking of those big shifts, one thing that really stood out in the 2025 DBIR, something that kind of stopped us in our tracks, was this explosion in third-party involvement in breaches. It wasn't just a small increase, was it? It felt monumental.
You're absolutely right. It's stark. The number literally doubled.
Yeah.
From 15% of breaches involving a third party to 30% in just 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah. And the report's cover, it visually captures this perfectly. It shows this structure looks stable maybe, but it's inherently unstable, like a Jenga tower. That's what happens when you build your security on potentially shaky third-party relationships you haven't fully examined. We also saw a big jump in system intrusion, which is basically, attackers breaking directly into systems. That's often the first step before ransomware hits, or exploiting vulnerabilities, how they're getting that initial foothold.
That's a serious reality check. But, okay, think about an organization. They're stretched, thin, limited resources. How do they even start untangling these third-party webs, especially when they might not even know what's connected? How do you balance tackling the human element, which is always there, with this growing complexity from third parties and technology?
We look at it with, maybe a bit of a cynical but pragmatic view. Think of it like a confusion matrix. 2 axes.
Yeah.
How much money are you willing to spend on security? And how much are you willing or able to change your company culture? So if you've got lots of money and you could drive cultural change, great. You're heading towards a deluxe security program. Fewer resources, but you can change culture. Maybe you aim for a full zero trust setup. Plenty of resources, but culture change is hard. Well, at least you can focus on detecting things faster. But if you're low on resources and you can't change the culture, Honestly, your best bet is probably to pray. The risk just becomes overwhelming.
That gracing.
And the attackers.
Yeah.
They get this matrix. They target the right people, the vulnerable ones, often using something trendy, like Alex Pinto mentioned, smishing campaigns. They exploit these exact weaknesses.
Makes perfect, if slightly terrifying, sense. But when we say third party in breach terms, what does that actually mean? Is it just our SaaS tools, or is it bigger?
Wow. The report points to two main groups, really, plus a combination that's getting trickier. First, yeah, it's someone hosting your data for you, your classic SaaS providers, cloud environments. Second, it's third parties that can access your data. Contractors in your system, maybe external companies with network links. Remember that ancient story of Target breached via their HVAC provider?
Oh yeah, classic example.
Exactly. And then these can combine. You get third party times third party, or even like a ninth party breach.
Yeah.
We saw cases, like with Snowflake. Credentials stolen from a contractor were then used on a third party environment that was hosting the actual data. The absolute crucial takeaway for any organization, we believe, is you have to understand the specific relationships you have with your third parties, because there are almost certainly gaps where you both think the other one is handling security and nobody actually is.
So the attack surface keeps morphing, keeps getting more complex. But amidst all that, there's this one vulnerability that just refuses to go away. Credential abuse. Still the #1 way in. For over a decade. Often tied up with phishing, vulnerability exploits, with all the talk, all the training on identity. Why is this still happening? What are we missing?
Well, from our viewpoint, there are a couple of deep-rooted reasons. First, security has to be simple for the average user, right? The non-technical person. And that simplicity often creates the weakest link that gets exploited. But there's a bigger, more systemic issue. It's the browser's cookie mechanism itself.
The cookies?
Yeah, it sounds basic, but this is 33-year-old technology we're talking about. And it's still acting as a single point of failure for identity and access. And here's the scary part. Cookies, cached session data. They're surprisingly visible to browser extensions. Our own data, stuff we contributed to the DBIR, shows that something like 6.5%, 6.5% of all extensions on the Chrome store can read this sensitive info. It makes bypassing identity controls way too easy.
6.5%, that's huge.
It is. Think about the Cyberhaven breach example Alex mentioned. One single line of code, dumping browser cookies, was enough for total compromise. So when we talk about zero trust, current approaches often aren't truly zero trust if they still hinge on something static like a cookie. Right now, attackers kind of have the upper hand. They can pretty reliably mimic environments to fool identity systems we think are solid.
That's a massive blind spot. And adding another layer here, the DBIR found something pretty significant about user environments too, right? The role of unmanaged devices.
Oh, this was really eye-opening for us. The report found almost half, nearly 50% of endpoints compromised by info stealers. You know, malware that quietly steals passwords, financial info, browser cookies. Almost half were compromised on unmanaged devices.
Unmanaged, so personal laptops, home PCs.
Exactly. This finding just completely blurs the old lines between your network and your devices versus, well, everything else. Customer devices, employee personal devices. They're not yours, but they're hitting your network, accessing corporate data. The DBIR specifically looked for corporate data stolen from machines where users logged into both, say, personal Facebook and corporate Salesforce, all on unmanaged Windows versions that couldn't even join a company domain.
So companies might not even know this data exposure is happening.
Often, they have absolutely no idea, which severely limits their ability to react to a breach, let alone prevent it. We really think this shows where traditional security, focused on the perimeter, just falls short. Because, let's face it, the perimeter's basically gone.
Okay, let's shift gears. The hot topic, AI. Everyone assumes, based on headlines, that AI is the next big attack vector, changing everything. But the DBIR kind of turns that idea on its head, doesn't it, in a really insightful way?
It really does. And this is where our own data contribution was quite revealing. Right now, AI being used by attackers to fundamentally change how breaches happen. It's basically a non-quantity. Yes, attackers are using it to make phishing emails better or slicker malware, but it's not fundamentally changing the initial access game. Not yet, anyway. But here's the twist. The real AI risk, identified by the DBIR and backed by our insights, it's the reverse problem. It's employee use of AI.
Employee use? How so?
Think about how these AI platforms are built. They're engineered like social media apps. They want to go viral. They're designed to compel users to give me more data, give me more data.
And your data painted a pretty interesting, maybe alarming picture of that behavior.
It did. On managed company machines, we found a huge 72% of users were just using personal accounts for AI tools.
Right.
And another 17% were using their corporate logins, but not through any proper integrated SSO or SAML, just typing in their work credentials.
Wow. So what's the implication there?
It's enormous potential for accidental data exfiltration. The silliest kind, really. Oh no, I just accidentally fed confidential company strategy into this public AI. This risk is seriously underestimated, we think. If a company doesn't have a really clear AI policy beyond just saying no AI, which is basically impossible to enforce, now there's this huge exposure just waiting to happen, all because these tools are so compelling.
So from your perspective, how is AI really changing things, or maybe not changing things, for users and organizations?
AI is pushing everything out to the edge. The data involved is often unstructured. People are using these tools because they feel an urgent business need, and it impacts everything. Data security, who owns the data, visibility, how you even sanction these tools. What we see driving it is pure experimentation by employees. They want to try the cool new AI thing to be more productive. The problem is, inside these AI apps, authorization is often wide open, pretty much unlimited, as Or put it. Users can process, access, send data without the usual checks and balances security teams rely on. We see that as a major shift. Risk is moving right into the end user's hands, often without them fully getting the potential consequences.
And this all seems to loop back, doesn't it? Back to where users spend most of their time. The browser. It really feels like the browser is where all this compelling, sometimes risky behavior actually happens.
That's exactly our core thesis at LayerX. And the DBIR trends really back this up. The browser is the new nerve center of the modern workspace. Simple as that. Think about it. 90% of what people do at work, it's in the browser. And a huge chunk of mistakes, vulnerabilities, data loss, it's happening right there. Inside SOX apps, web apps, we see the browser as this fascinating lighthouse. From there, you can see all the moving parts of modern risk. Unmanaged devices connecting, dodgy websites being visited, sensitive data leaking out, whether to AI tools or somewhere else.
And the attackers see this too.
Absolutely. They're increasingly going after cookies, credentials, they're weaponizing malicious extensions. The browser is, like Or said, the best show in town. For us defenders and for the attackers too. Historically, security investment was heavy on endpoints, network firewalls, but the web now, it's so applicative, it's dynamic, interactive. People are doing critical work right inside that enclave of the browser where their identity, their company data, their SaaS apps all live together. And the result, more account takeovers, more data loss incidents happening right inside this new battlefield.
Which is precisely why things like browser security platforms and that extension model you mentioned suddenly become so relevant.
Exactly right. The extension piece.
Yeah.
That's just a smart way to get it done, technically. It lets us augment the browser you already use. No clunky agents, no big change for the user, but you get incredibly granular control and visibility. The real game changer for us is seeing data and user activity in real time without having to break encryption or force all traffic through some bottleneck, that native browser view. It lets you tackle all these modern problems, Gen AI security, web and SaaS DLP, SaaS security posture, spotting risky extensions, which ties right back to that third-party code risk secure browsing, and yes, finally getting a real grip on identity protection right where it matters.
So looking ahead then, crystal ball time, what's the big prediction? What do you think we'll be talking about after the 2026 DBIR drops?
Well, Alex Pinto's top prediction, a hockey stick, increase in MFA evasion.
Ooh, interesting. Getting around multi-factor.
Oh, yeah. How are attackers bypassing what we thought was the big fix? That's what he's watching. He's also really interested in the impact of service interruption from ransomware, especially those really harsh penalties we saw in some big retail breaches recently. He wants to quantify that. How much does downtime really cost? Beyond just the ransom. Think liability, lost revenue. How does that change the calculation of how bad a breach is? And from our side, LayerX, we predict, based on what Or sees, increased creativity in attacks on web applications, specifically targeting those long-tail applications, the less common, maybe less maintained web apps that security teams don't watch as closely. Using those for ransomware delivery, data exfiltration, adversaries always look for the path of least resistance, right? And often, That's the stuff we're not paying enough attention to.
If we've learned one really profound thing from the 2025 DBIR, maybe it's this: breach risk isn't just about who gets in anymore. It's increasingly about what doors we leave open, often without even realizing it. Look, we've only really scratched the surface today. There's so much more depth in the full report. We absolutely encourage you dive into the 2025 DBIR yourself. Explore these insights. They're crucial. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.